Let's more upbeat topic. Two more questions, and we'll call it a day. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, sure.
I appreciate your enormous patience. I know I'm sucking up your whole morning.
Have a good time.
But I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the revision toolkit, which you put together for yourself. And I'm wondering, what all should a writer have in their revision toolkit? What would you recommend that they stock that with?
Well, you learn, the more you do it, the more you learn. And, you talk to other writers and they say, I do this or I do that. And one of the things that I like about the book Novel Ideas that I talked about earlier is that we asked all those writers, how do you revise? Do you have tricks of revision or particular methods that you use? How do you approach it? And essentially, everybody has to figure that out for themselves. Just like you have to figure out what kind of writer you are, you have to think about how you want to revise or what seems possible for you. So in A Commotion in Your Heart, I sort of list a series of things that you can try. The first one, and probably most commonly used, is just to read through it, to print it out and start reading and see where you go, that sounds terrible. And that can be useful, but you pretty soon start skimming is the problem with that. And so, you can be more effective early in that process, early in the book. And I think you generally need to do more than that. Reading your work aloud, or better yet, having somebody read it to you, is really helpful, because when you read it aloud, you really hear the wrong notes, or you feel, like sometimes you can always tell a run-on sentence because you can't breathe anymore while you're still trying to read it. It just goes on, and you're like, ah. So you'll figure that out. But when other people read it to you, you'll hear where you didn't get the rhythms you were going for, because they read it in a different rhythm than you intended. So that can be really helpful. Sometimes I use calendars if I get confused about time. I'll put all the things on a calendar and then, see where the gaps are. And I do revision along the way too. I don't necessarily only do it at the end of a draft. So I use stuff like that, and just timelines generally, just to be able to visually get a fix on how things move and where things are. And then I have this crazy thing that I do, which I now use spreadsheets for. I didn't used to do spreadsheets, but now I do. So it helps me see where things are. So I'll say chapter 1, and then I'll write the first line of the chapter. And then, in the next lines, I'll, summarize what's going on. And so then I'll have the characters along the top. And wherever that character appears, I'll put an X. Or if they're mentioned, I'll put an M. So when I get all the way through the whole thing, I can see where the characters are, and I can see where they're not, which is very important sometimes. And in the process, which is extremely anal retentive, all my other head starts going, and I start thinking of other things, but I don't stop. I just start jotting them down. So by the time I get finished doing that, I end up with a whole bunch of questions and observations that then I can pretty much make into a very specific revision list. So it's not like revise the character of Bob. It's like Bob's, it'll be something specific about Bob. What Bob does doesn't match what he said his child is, or, something like that. So there'll be very specific things to look at. And then I just go through them through the manuscript. And that's been the best thing for me. It takes hours and hours and hours and days. I happen to really weirdly like it. I think it's a wonderful thing if you can get to the point where you enjoy revision, because I think your books will, just be better for it. And, I think at one point in this book too, I talked about the idea that one of the advantages of not being a rich and famous writer with everybody waiting for your work is that nobody's waiting for your work. It's the good news and the bad news, because that means that you have time to make it the best that it can be. Whereas a lot of writers who are successful are constantly pressured to, get their book out on some kind of a schedule based on what the publisher wants. And I haven't had to do that. So I have all these beautiful unpublished books. What are you going to do?
Or my last question for you is maybe a little bit of a lazy one, but I think it's a good one. For those readers who are about to pick up their copy of A Commotion in Your Heart,
Yes.
Notes on Writing and Life, available wherever fine ebooks are sold. Fine ebooks and paperbacks if you must, but that ebook, I'm telling you, it's a thing of beauty. If there was one thing, and obviously there's so much advice in here, as we've just really kind of scratched the surface over our conversation here of things in this book. There's a lot here for writers to invest their time and to take away. But if they're not going to do that, if they were only going to take one thing away from this book that would maybe make a significant difference in their writing life, what is the one thing you would most want them to take away?
The thing I want you to take away is, if you really need to do it, you better do it. And don't stop. Remember that it's supposed to be hard, and don't set your heart on anything. You have to separate the business end of it from the process end of it. So that's not just any one thing. But I think generally, I would say we're all in it together. It's hard, but we're all in it together. And I think that book says that. I hope it says that.
That's a beautiful sentiment. We are all in it together, aren't we? I hope we are.
Yeah, that's right. I think the best of us are. I like that.